How you doing? Today, we're going to be taking a look at Hegel's H390 integrated amplifier. Now, those of you in the know with your finger on the pulse, your ear to the ground, whatever, you may have heard that the H390 is the absolute sweet spot in Hegel's lineup. Could this just be hype, or are the general consensus of audio bros onto something here? Could this be the
sweet, sweet sugar baby cotton candy, boba tea, licorice taffy, Canadian maple syrup, cream tiny, ring pop, Kit Kat Tootsie Roll, Frosted Flakes, candied apple, Oreo McFlurry, chocolate chunk cookie? Want to eat it all until type 2 diabetes sets in and we regret absolutely nothing?
Or is this just another integrated from Hegel? This, my friends, is the next stop on my audio trip. Let's have a chat about Hegel's H390 integrated amplifier. Roll the intro. Now, I've had this bad boy since June 23rd of 2023, so this qualifies as a long-term review-ish. I purchased it at the same place I got my last Hegel. Some of you may recognize Lewis from their YouTube channel.
You will enjoy the 390, and it will rock your socks.
You see what he did there, right? Jedi mind trick, and it probably worked on me.
Don't all the time, I'm letting go. I wanna find someone to love. I feel alive, I think you know. We're getting down, we're getting low. Low, 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 low. We're getting down, we're getting low. Low, 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 low. We're getting down, we're getting low. Don't all the time, I'm letting go.
Since I spent my own money here, this video isn't sponsored. Alright, so now that that's out of the way, why the H390? Why not a different amp? I'm going to be upfront with you guys and let you know that I have become a Hegel fanboy. It's true. I came to this conclusion after many demos though, and it just seems to be the way that I'm wired. I happen to already own the H190, and this was the amp that opened me up to how much the electronics behind your speakers can impact your sound quality. I'll leave a link to that video below the like button if you're interested in watching. It was basically just a huge realization for me, and the H190 has been an important part of my music ever since. So, looking for that next step, I did try other integrated amps out, but I kept going back to Hegel. It just strikes the right balance between practicality, design, features, and value for the money that you shell out. But most importantly, I like the way it sounds with my equipment. It just integrates perfectly. And that, my friends, is an intended pun. But one of my concerns was with my existing speakers. So these Klipsch Cornwell 4s are notoriously easy to drive. They're very efficient speakers. Now, I have had them on the H190, which is probably overkill in terms of power. It's 150 watts per channel. Now, I know for a fact that these things do well on low power tube amps. They'll sound different, but they do very well on them. Upping to the H390, that's 250 watts per channel now. Is it overkill? Am I going to hear a difference? Is it going to blow my speakers? These were the things that were going through my head, and I honestly wasn't sure. So unfortunately, I wasn't able to do an in-home demo before purchase this time around. So this was actually a huge leap of faith on my part. Quite honestly, at the time, I thought, maybe I was making a really expensive mistake. How expensive, you ask? Now's as good a time as any to mention that the H390 retails for $6,000 US. Now, that's assuming you don't haggle. What's your best price? Respectfully, let's go a little lower. Can we do a payment plan? Can you do a little better? Can we go just like a little bit lower? It can't hurt, right? What do you got to lose? Tried haggle for Hegel. So after unboxing and setting it up, I gave it time to properly burn in, and it's been there ever since. No A/B testing. I just enjoyed the thing for over 8 months, and it served me very well. no quirks or hiccups, just a lot of great music and ear-to-ear grins. The thing sounds amazing. Thank you guys so much for watching. Please leave a like and subscribe. No. I'm not going to shortchange you guys. It's review time. Let's start by comparing to the outgoing H190. All right, here are both integrated side by side. And looking at the front, I wouldn't blame you guys for mistaking one unit for the other. There's no model number here to be seen, and they're the exact same width as well. The H390, while larger in all other dimensions, maintains the same sparse design language that we know and love from the H190. Now, some of you may have noticed that there is no headphone jack on the higher-end H390. And this could be seen as a con for some of you, and I wouldn't really blame you for feeling that way. Now, having said that, the only time I have ever used H190's headphone jack was, well, it was never. I've got dedicated headphone gear for this, and the H190 has never really been strategically placed where I would even be tempted to use its headphone jack. I guess Hegel felt like at this level of, for lack of a better term, integratedness, we're going to be more demanding in terms of sound quality and have separate headphone system if we even want that type of thing. So yeah, why overcomplicate with more electronics that won't be appreciated or even used? Other than that, the screen, the logo, and even the knobs are larger on the H390. About knob feel, there's a little more resistance on the H190 than the H390. These are a little smoother. Both feel great though. So looking at the inside of both amps, you can begin to appreciate how much more complex and robust the H390 is. Check out the separation of the left and right channels on the 390. Notice the contrast in how much closer they are to each other on the H190. This is because the H390 has a dual mono design, which is one of its more notable upgrades. With this, both left and right channels have different power supplies, input grounds, and power grounds. It's basically like having two completely independent mono amps in one chassis. Now, because we've got separate amps for the left and right channels, you get more independent channel shielding with better, more robust power. Now that's compared to a standard stereo configuration, of course. So why should you care? Well, this should give you better separation and get rid of any crosstalk between channels. Some prefer having two completely separate mono amps so they're not sharing a power cable or chassis, but keep in mind that those take up twice the space. Your mileage may vary, but to take a page out of Billy Madison and just totally bastardize it.
If dual mono is cool, consider H390 Miles Davis.
All right, turning both units around and looking at their tushies, you could see that the H390 is a lot less cluttered. Apart from that, inputs and outputs are all the same, except the H390 adds a digital BNC out and a BNC in. And we're going to get into why right now. Now this brings us to our next standout feature called DAC loop. This is actually pretty cool. The way it works is you connect a BNC type coax cable from H390's BNC output to your favorite external DAC's input. Now make sure to connect the DAC back to your H390 via XLR, and now you can send music using your Hegel's inbuilt streamer to your external DAC. Said DAC routes music back to Hegel's amp section, so now you basically don't need a separate streamer. You're streaming from the H390 and letting your external DAC do the work, forgoing the inbuilt DAC on the H390. I could see this being one of the reasons why you would choose the H390 over the 190, as this could save you from shelling out on a separate streamer, presuming you want to use an external DAC, of course. Perhaps if I bought the 390 instead of the 190, I may have done this instead of buying the Lumen U2 Mini. Would have saved some rack space and a couple of bucks in the process, but I've climbed this hill and I'll bloody well die on it. All right, so here's the 390 in its natural habitat. As you can see, this is my media room, and I don't just listen to music here. We also watch movies, and it's at the epicenter of the room. Now, one thing I really like aesthetically is that it is a black box and it completely F's off when you want it to. So it's on, I can change the display so it goes off, but it's still on playing music or whatever. And I just love that about the Hegel design language. It sounds great, and it goes the hell away and doesn't draw attention to itself. It doesn't say, look at me, I'm audio, like it's bright blue lights. And no, it's not about that. It's just about good sound and getting out of the way. And that's one thing I love about Hegel. Quick note on heat. So I have it in a cabinet, and it does quite well in here. Having said that, electronics, when you put them in cabinets, they don't like heat. So I have a fan on top of it. Here, I'll show you the light. And it's thermostat controlled. So when it senses things are getting a little warm, it pushes out air. I think it pushes it out the back. I have one upstairs that pushes it out the front, and these are great. As far as thermals, one thing I've noticed about owning Hegel is they don't have any fans internally, but they're so well built and they never get hot or even that warm. So it's just about prolonging the life of the unit, having a fan here because it's in a cabinet. If I didn't have this thing in a cabinet, I wouldn't bother with a fan. There's really no point. But yeah, I mean, I think it just looks great, and it doesn't draw any attention to itself, and it's great for this use case. I just love it for me. It works very well.
The last standout feature we're going to talk about briefly is its improved internal DAC. Admittedly, I don't know the specifics in which chip they use, but I do know that the H390's DAC is greatly improved over the H190's. I'll go into this more in my listening impressions, which starts now.
So I decided for the first comparison, I would just go ham on the quality of signal. I used the Lumen U2 Mini streamer hooked up to my Singzer SU6 through USB, and from there, I2S to my Venus 2. Now, XLRs to both Hegels, so I'm only testing amplification on both integrateds, but giving them the best possible signal chain available.
After volume matching, the first track I decided to A/B was The Call on Letters for the Future. A wonderfully dynamic track that starts off simple and gets rather busy, in a good way. I played it on the H190 first and really enjoyed myself. It's a great track. Once I switched to the H390, I found the horns more prominent and noticed better separation and imaging. When the track got more complicated, the H390 seemed to handle it a bit better, so there is a difference here. After that, I felt compelled to test both Hegels as a one-and-done integrated solution, so I disconnected all the external equipment and started streaming YouTube from my PC via optical cable. Let's go hard with some Wagner. The H390 was first, and yes, it did go hard in this scenario. Switching to the H190, I felt like some life was lost. The scale of the track seemed lower and not as three-dimensional. It still sounded good, and if I wasn't A-Bing, I would have enjoyed myself either way. Alright, how about watching some Netflix? Now, I've got a dedicated surround system in here, but if I'm watching anime or anything 2-channel, it's gonna sound much better through my hi-fi rig. You can definitely appreciate the upgraded internal DAC on the H390 here. Things sound larger and more realistic to the point where it's just more enjoyable. Now, to give these integrated amps a real chance to strut their stuff, let's try streaming Rune right to them. So I started with the H190, and I instantly realized that streaming is so much better from something like the Hegel than directly out of a computer. Background was black, and the resolution was pretty incredible. But, I mean, no point rebeating that dead horse, that's just another video. Switching to the 390, and everything gets turned up a couple notches, except the volume, which was literally turned down too. I enjoyed the track from both machines, but I appreciate the difference more on the 390. It wasn't night and day here, but it was better. Felt like playing some Rush. Now this was interesting, as I found there to be more of a gap in sound quality this time. Neil Peart's cymbal hits were just more immediately noticed as more prominent. Just about every aspect of the music was on the same page. Geddy's voice, the guitar, the bass. It was much more congested through the H190 and sounded more live and lifelike on the H390. It also felt warmer and less clinical on the 390. So the difference in quality that I'm hearing, is it a product of better amplification or the improved DAC? You see, the H390 has a bit perfect DAC, while with the H190, Roon does some converting to get to where Hegel feels is the internal DAC sweet spot. Letting things go. Here, I was scratching my head a bit. I think I preferred the H390, but it wasn't as noticeable a difference as the last track. I'm guessing the lack of complexity had me focusing on tonality, which her voice did seem a bit better out of the H390, but I'm not totally sure I'd be able to tell the difference blindfolded. While this is a great new track to check out, I don't think it's something to A-B off of. Lesson learned. So then I decided to play another Wolfman track, one with more Spilkes, and this time I'm back to easily telling the difference. I'm picking out more detail here, but not at the expense of trebles sounding harsh. The mids and highs are just more pleasing to my ears. So yeah, the 390 takes a W. Out of curiosity though, I played the same track through my Lumen U2 Mini Venus 2 combo, and yeah, sound quality jumped up again. So before we get on to any more impressions, I wanted to touch on the big question I had earlier. You know, the one about high efficiency speakers and the H390. Well, long before I came to any conclusions myself, I interviewed Anders at Toronto Audio Fest and asked him what he thought. All right, so off camera again, we were talking about the difference between the H190 and the H390 using high efficiency speakers like my Klipsch Cornwall 4s.
Yeah.
And you said something really interesting.
Well, you asked me if the differences between the two amplifiers was going to be very apparent with speakers like that, and I said I'm quite certain it is, because the type of differences between these two amplifiers is quite a bit in the higher frequencies, the mids and the tweeters, where it's more precise. It sounds more detailed, but in a more natural musical way in the 390. So it's not so much the power, because I find the H190 is powerful enough to drive, literally any.
Pretty much anything.
Yeah, exactly. So
yeah.
It's not that. There is, of course, more power. There's even deeper, even more thump in the bass, but on your Klipsch's, I don't think that's going to matter much. But at the highs, it's going to be more snappy and more fun.
Oh, I've certainly enjoyed it, and I'm looking forward to A-Bing both of them. But also, it's got a dual mono design, which the H190 does not.
No,
so
that's true.
Maybe that has something to do with it too.
Yeah, it could be. The dual mono design helps, of course, and then there's a little bit more space inside the 390, so we can better separate the low voltage, more sensitive parts of the amplifier from the power supplies and output stages.
Right. Okay, cool. All right, well, that was so informative. Thank you so much.
You too. It's
Right.
great.
This was a really interesting perspective. I hadn't considered the effect of having a larger chassis, giving them more space to separate the internals, and how this could affect sound. That's just really cool. So yeah, as it turns out, my risk paid off, and the H390 makes a significant difference with my Cornwalls. And I didn't waste my money. All right, let's do this. For day 2, I wanted to get some different speakers into the mix, so enter my brand new KEF R3 Metas. I continued comparing both integrated amps barebone using Roon, so no external DAC or streamer was used. My friend Andy was over this time to give me his opinion, and I gave him the honor of sitting in the shotgun lazy boy in my room's sweet spot. One thing to note is Andy had no idea which integrated was the new one because they look so similar stacked with the component fan. We just differentiated by calling them A and B. On the first track, Andy said that the 190 seemed more sharp and spiky, while the transitions are more smooth from note to note on the 390. He then told me that the H190 sounded bad. While I don't think the H190 sounded bad, I agree that there was a really nice difference between the two in favor of the H390. All right, so we switched to 50 Ways to Leave Your Lover, and we went back and forth quite a bit here. The tambourine, he said, was more separated, and the drums sounded more like drums on the 390 and more muddled on the H190. He was actually expecting them to sound better on the H190 due to the sharpness that he heard in the last song, but that wasn't the case. At this point, he was beginning to form an opinion of which integrated he preferred, so I covered the amps up and we did a blind listening test with the same track. He prefers the H390 hands down and picked it out blind. The music sounded much better and more realistic on the H390, he said. I'm going to add that the tonality was also much better in my opinion. For both of us, it just wins hands down. In Wild Horses, Andy said the piano sounds amazing on this. He said it feels live and so realistic. Myself, I got goosebumps. The way her voice echoes in the recording just added to this. I wanted to switch back to the H190 and Andy said no. He just wanted to listen to the 390 more. Next track we played was Alan Taylor, The Stranger, and it was such a good recording. Nicely dynamic and filled the room with such an authentic and pleasing sound. We switched back and Andy told me he does not want to listen to the H190 anymore. And that's pretty much how I felt too. Don't get me wrong, the H190 sounds great, and if that's all I had, I would enjoy it. But now that we hear the difference, it's honestly hard to go back when both options are right in front of us. At one point, we landed on this amazing track. So I decided to play it again, only this time I switched to my Venus Lumen SU6 doing the digital end of things and using the H390's amp. Andy's comments were, this sounds better, then this sounds amazing, then this sounds dramatically better, and then he said, the other one sounded live, but this one just blew me away. He then wanted to go back to Paul Simon's 50 Ways and that other Wild Horses track from earlier, but using the same beefed up configuration this time. So we did this. He asked me if I heard a difference on Wild Horses. I told him it sounded amazing, but we didn't hear it back to back, so it's really hard to say. But one thing I will admit to you guys is this was my third time listening to this track ever. The first two times were about an hour earlier that day. And it still somehow managed to give me goosebumps. So the next day, I'm back to solo listening in my preferred sweet spot, and I chose Van Morrison's Making Whoopee. I was using the Venus Lumen SU6 combo with my R3 Metas just to compare both amps. Going back and forth on this track quite a bit, while differences are more subtle than both integrateds using the internal DACs, the 390 gives me a more true-to-life and warmer sound signature with better separation. The H390 takes everything I like about the H190 and just gives me more. All right, last comparison, I promise. This one's just for science. How about Venus Lumen SU6 used in conjunction with the H190 versus H390 by itself?
This was so tough to choose a favorite. I went back and forth so many times, concentrating on different aspects of the mix. Piano, voice, bass, mids, highs. The H390 seemed to fill the room with sound more. It had a warmer tone and better separation, but the H190 Venus Lumen SU6 combo gave me something more in the way that those sounds were presented. It just comes across as a bit more analog with better imaging. If I had a gun pointed at my head and had to pick, I think I'd actually choose the H190 Venus Lumen SU6 combo over the H390 by itself. But it's such a toss-up at this level, which was really surprising to me. So yeah, I concluded that while the H390 is the new king, in my house anyways, the H190 is still an insanely good amp and preamp once you run it with capable external equipment. No surprise there, right? The 390 comes with an already good internal DAC and streamer, but it still gets much better when you pair it with the same stuff. In fact, the 390 smokes the 190 when it's apples to apples, both in bare bones or fully kitted out configurations. Still, I'm sure some of you guys are wondering if you're better off getting the H190 and a separate DAC, streamer, maybe DDC combo, or maybe just plunk your cash down on the H390 and be done with it. That's ultimately going to be your decision, and I hope this comparison helped. Look, Hegel makes these things as all-in-one solutions, but in my opinion, their real strength lies within their amp and preamp sections. Something to consider if you want to spend on the H390 is you get the bonus of a pretty good DAC right off the bat, much better than the H190's internal DAC. My H190 improves quite a lot when I let my modestly priced, albeit awesome, Chord Mojo 2 do the DA conversion. There's that, there's the extra power headroom you get, there's DAC loop, dual mono, and the more realistic and live sound all equate to earning the Hegel H390's more premium price. So one thing I've come to love and really appreciate about this hobby is just how faceted and diverse it can be. There are so many aspects at play here, and every single part has its own nuances. I've mentioned this in past videos, but I want you guys to think of our hobby as a trip. an ongoing experience. Now, when you go on a trip, it's not just about your destination. It's about how you perceive things, how you live along the way. Enjoy yourselves. If you just concentrate about when and where you're going to end up, or end game, you're going to miss out on all of these nuanced experiences. This is where I seem to be living right now, and I fucking love it. I'm sure that some of you are here because you are chasing endgame, which is totally cool. That's why Hegel sells these integrated amps. They're great one and done solutions. If you go ahead and you get one and you're enjoying your music and you get the hell out, that's a totally respectable endgame in my view. I'm actually jealous about all the cash you're going to save too. But just be warned, there's always going to be something to potentially improve upon. Something that may suit your tastes even better. And that's why Hegel had the foresight to give you guys the option to expand on these integrated amplifiers. So I think of the H390 as my home base and a really, really good starting point. Now, after comparing these two integrated amps, I've decided that they're both winners. When I bought the H390 initially, it was my intention to sell off the 190 because having it would be, well, it'd be redundant. But after living with them and certainly these comparisons, I'm not going to do that anymore. Instead, the H190 is just going to go in another room with different speakers. Having said that, the H390 is my new gold standard and a really nice upgrade from the H190. If you're only looking to buy one integrated amp and just be done with it all, this is the one that I think you should get. If you're looking for your next home base to build off of, then this should definitely be on your short list as well. It's a beautiful sounding Norwegian powerhouse, and yes, I'm positive it's the sweet spot in Hegel's lineup. You're getting a damn good return for the money you're spending here, and it comes very highly recommended from Mr. Chips. I'd like to thank you guys so much for watching and hanging out with me. Please leave a like, subscribe, and I will catch you in the next video. Bye. Mexico would probably be a much cheaper trip. I'm itchy here in my Maple Leaf. I would stay at the Barcello Primi. We'd go to Shellha, hang out, snack lunch in the hall. But it wouldn't sound as good.
Do you guys like bigger knobs or smaller knobs?
No, it definitely wouldn't sound as good.
I like all the knobs.
I like Mexico. Ole.